The year is 1990, and Francis Vincent Jr. is looking to get some juicy revenue boosts in the form of expanding the league for the first time in 16 years. Many cities were considered to be the new homes of Major League Baseball, including Buffalo, Charlotte, Nashville, Phoenix, and Tampa Bay. Come on, they're never getting a team. They can't even figure out who's representing them. After a lot of boring bureaucratic bullshit, the host cities were finally chosen to be Denver, Colorado, and Miami, Florida. It was only natural that Florida would get a professional team. They had been home to spring training for many years at this point, and ultimately, Miami's group, led by Wayne Huizenga, CEO of Blockbuster, would win out over that hot mess in St. Pete. Yeah, better luck next time, guys. To rub it in even more, when the team name was chosen, they opted to represent the entire state, as the Florida Marlins were officially born. Taking inspiration from the previous minor league teams who shared the same name. They were set to play their games in Joe Robbie Stadium, sharing it with the Dolphins, a relic of the age of trying to cram MLB and NFL together in one cookie-cutter stadium. It was the beginning of a new age in baseball, and the Marlins were looking to lead the charge.
And mark it down.
Headlined by Gary Sheffield and Brian Harvey, the '93 Marlins looked to get off to a hot start. Well, a hot start for expansion teams, I guess. As even though they went 64-98 in their first year, they at least finished higher than the Mets. The mid-90s continued to roll on, with the Marlins playing like you'd expect, underwhelming records at the bottom of their division, although they weren't absolutely terrible. Like, this isn't Devil Rays bad, this is just regular bad. In '96, they even began to show some promise, as their pitching had rounded into form, with Kevin Brown and Al Leiter leading the way, with the former finishing second in Cy Young voting with a 1.89 ERA, and the latter throwing the first no-hitter in team history.
Struck him out! The Marlins have their first no-hitter in history! Al Leiter has done it!
They won 80 games that year after going 31-24 in August and September, and they were already on their third coach with Jim Leyland. But things were looking up, as they would be big in free agency, signing Bobby Bonilla, Moise Alou, and Alex Fernandez. Was this young club ready to make some noise? With their aforementioned acquisitions, as well as their ace Kevin Brown, the Marlins were actually semi-respectable in '97, as they got out to a 50-36 first half. At the deadline, they added Darren Daulton and Jim Eisenreich to provide some veteran presence. And alongside guys like Luis Castillo, Livan Hernandez, and Charles Johnson, they would put up numbers that were great for a team like this, though not anything world-shattering. They would settle around the middle of the pack for league offenses, but it was their pitching that allowed them to rise. Posting the fourth best ERA and allowing the fourth fewest runs, the Marlins pitching staff helped carry the team as they began to slip in July. Brown would continue to show why he's a force to be reckoned with, as he would throw the team's second no-hitter only a year after the first, being only a hit-by-pitch away from a perfect game. The team responded with a 19-10 August, including taking 5 of 8 against the Braves, whom they were fighting for the division with. Alas, despite their efforts, Atlanta would pull away, but the Marlins were in luck, as they finished 4 games ahead of the Dodgers and Mets to earn the wildcard spot. Funnily enough, 92 wins was good enough for the second best record in the NL? Goes to show how much times have changed, I guess. And so, just 5 years into their existence, the Florida Marlins were playoff bound. And as they prepared to face the San Francisco Giants, it was probably safe to assume the Marlins were a little out of their league. Typically, you build a team up over time, they get some success, but it usually takes them a few tries to get over the hump and win it all. The Marlins said, fuck all that, and they decided to make the most of the opportunity handed to them. They swept the Giants in the NLDS, thanks in large part to the offense keeping it close, with Alu hitting a walk-off in Game 2 to secure the win, and Fernandez throwing 7 in Game 3 to shut down the opposition. In the NLCS, they faced their rivals from Atlanta, where the teams would jostle back and forth, with Brown coming up big in Game 1, and the Braves shutting down the Marlins offense in Games 2 and 4. Heading into Game 5 tied at 2, Brown would unexpectedly be sidelined due to an illness, and Fernandez would suffer a torn rotator cuff. So it was up to Livan Hernandez to throw the most important game of his life so far against the fearsome Greg Maddux. And well, he earned his spot in the rotation, striking out 15 batters as the Marlins hung on for a 2-1 win. With Brown back for Game 6, he would throw 140 pitches in an astounding effort, throwing a complete game. The offense would pile on 4 in the first, and they would never look back, as somehow the Marlins were National League champions. However, their biggest test was yet to come, as they would go against the Cleveland Indians as big underdogs. This was a team that had gone 50 years without a title, and the city was hungry to finally return to baseball immortality. But the Marlins wouldn't quit, as Hernandez would once again throw well in Game 1, and in Game 3 tied at 7 in the 9th. The team would bat around, as Sheffield and Bonilla would knock in 2 each, and Darren Daulton and Rays legend Cliff Floyd would score on defensive errors. They would put up 7 runs, enough to overcome Cleveland despite themselves scoring 4 in their frame. However, it remained close, as the next night the Indians would light up Tony Saunders. Yes, that Tony Saunders. And Brian Anderson, yes, that Brian Anderson, would get the save, tying the series at 2. Game 5 was a back and forth affair, as Cleveland would answer Florida's 2-run inning with 4 of their own, and then the Marlins would strike back with a big 3-run homer by Alu. Up 8-4 in the bottom of the 9th, the Indians were still refusing to die, as David Justice would hit a big single to cut it to 8-6, and Jim Thorne would make it a 1-run game. But they were able to shut the door down and come within one. But Florida was able to shut the door, and they would come within 1 win of a championship. However, they wouldn't get anything going in Game 6, as Brown would struggle, surrendering 4 runs. And so it came down to Game 7, where after Tony Fernandez would hit a 2-run single in the 3rd, the Indians would dominate on the mound, mowing down the Marlins into the late innings. Bonilla was able to cut it to 2-1.
One to deep right. Bonilla sends one out of here.
But as the team entered the 9th, Cleveland was poised to close it out. That's when Alu would hit a single to center, and Johnson would get him over to 3rd. And Craig Counsell would come up huge with a sac fly to score the tying run and send the game to extras.
Game 7 of the World Series is tied.
The bullpen would hold firm, and in the 11th, Cleveland reliever Charles Nagy would get into trouble, as a single and an error set up 1st and 3rd with 1 out. After an intentional walk, he was able to get Devon White out on a groundout, and facing Edgar Rentiera, history was made.
Into center field, the Florida Marlins have won the World Series.
Yeah, what the fuck? The Marlins are world champions? In their first try, they went all the way. Man, if only the Rays could have done that. But they pulled it off. And with their elite pitching core and strong hitting staff, they have suddenly emerged as a contender in the NL. So the quest to repeat is on. Let's see how the Marlins did. They went from winning the World Series to the worst record in baseball? How? What the fuck happened? Even the damn Devil Rays were better. How do you do something like this? Well, let's just say that good old Wayne loves his money, and running a baseball team is pretty expensive. It soon became clear that he was ready to sell, and so he did what any completely sensible owner would do immediately after winning a title. He blew it up. He destroyed the entire team. Just days after the World Series, Moisés Alou was sent to the Astros, and Kevin Brown was dealt to the Padres. White and Leiter, among others, were gone by Christmas. Then in May, they sent 5 players to the Dodgers: Bonilla, Sheffield, Johnson, Eisenreich, and Manuel Barrios, for Mike Piazza and Todd Zyla, who were both promptly flipped as well. Dave Dombrowski, the GM and later team president, was tasked with the heavy burden of sending everyone away, as part of ownership mandates. And even 25 years later, it still haunts him. From an organizational perspective, and everything that goes along with that, being in a position to try and win that second World Series would mean a great deal to me. Dombrowski says, "I would like to do that. We didn't really have a chance to celebrate very long the last time I was involved in it. We've had some good clubs since then. It just hasn't happened." He never got to enjoy that period of sustained success, as everyone was gone before the team even raised the banner. Watching highlights of the playoff run and knowing they were about to send away everyone. Guess that's what happens when you're stuck with a bad owner who claimed he lost $34 million after the World Series. He would eventually resign from the team after 2001, and finally, in 2018, he would get his second title with the Red Sox. When it was all said and done, 1998 was an absolute train wreck. You don't need me to tell you that it was historic, because it's plainly obvious. After winning on opening day, they proceeded to lose 11 in a row to immediately drop to the cellar, and they never even came close to recovering. It's still the most baffling fire sale in MLB history, and it's left many fans wondering what could have happened if the team continued to build. Maybe they could have become a real force in the NL, but who knows. With all these moves, it'll be forever until they even sniff another title. At least there were some bright spots, with the debuts of Alex Gonzalez and Luis Castillo, and all this tanking led to the Marlins being rewarded with the second overall pick. In October, the team was sold to John Henry, and he was given the arduous task of building the team back up from nothing. '99 was at least a bit better, as they matched their record from their first year at 64-98, almost like they were thrown right back to where they started. But as the new millennium came around, things began to look up for the future, as they would spend the next 3 years merely being just okay. Funnily enough, 9 years before the Rays would debut Instant Replay, the Marlins would debut the Test Run, as it was used to overturn a home run, which apparently worked so well that MLB decided not to use it until 2008. With the first pick in the draft this time, the team selected Adrian Gonzalez in 2000. Castillo and Derek Lee would become the main forces of the offense, and along with Preston Wilson and Mike Lowell, they were slowly beginning to get back up to relevance. A.J. Burnett and Brad Penny would become the new mainstays in the rotation, and Antonio Alfonseca would throw 45 saves in 2000. In 2002, the team would shake things up again, as Henry would sell after just 3 years to everyone's favorite businessman, Jeffrey Loria. Now, I like to rag on about how Stu is a completely terrible owner, but at least he stayed with the team and helped them to be kinda competitive. And in the end, he secured a stadium deal. Whether it turns out to be a success remains to be seen, but we'll see. However, Loria is another level of shit, as when he bought the Expos in '99, his first action was to demand a new stadium, as he looked to gather up as much public funding as he could by signing big-name players to get people interested, and then promptly shipping them off when the team still stunk. He had failed to get a new park, and in response he absolutely gutted the Expos, trading away anyone and everyone of value, and even failing to get a new TV contract for the 2000 season. In just 3 years, he took a team that had some promise and hope to stay in the area, and sent them to the brink of contraction. And sure enough, just a few years after he bailed, the team would move to DC and become the Washington Nationals. But of course, Loria was able to get out practically scot-free, and when he bought the Marlins, he brought over all of his cronies, which of course was one final fuck you to the city of Montreal. Yet despite that nonsense, the team was indeed playing better. They were still on the outside looking in. Hell, they didn't even have a winning record, but at least they were getting there. And in 2003, it was time for everything to finally pay off. With some more big-time signings in Ivan Rodriguez and Juan Pierre, the Marlins looked to break the mold and return to contention, and they instead fell flat in their face, going 19-29 to start the year. Oh well, another season down the drain, or so it seemed, but on May 11th, they brought in Jack McKeon to become the new manager, and it was then that things began to turn around. It started with this little guy from the Carolina Mudcats. You may have heard of him. His name was Miguel Cabrera. In his first game, he would hit a walk-off homer against guess who? And along with Dontrelle Willis, they helped kickstart the team into going 33-18 in June and July, getting them right back in the playoff race. They would continue to make moves, bringing back Jeff Conine, who was on the '97 team from the Orioles, and trading Gonzalez for reliever Uget Urbina. Mark Redman and Derek Lee would all post great seasons, and as the days rolled by, the Marlins were suddenly resembling the team they once were 6 years ago. Despite the slow start, they were able to keep pace heading into the final days of the season, as an 18-8 September helped cap off a 91-win season, once again getting them the wild card. In the NLDS, they once again faced the Giants, and after they were shut down in Game 1, it looked to be a foregone conclusion. I mean, they won 100 games that year, and were poised to make a deep run, helped by some random nobody named Barry Bonds. But the Marlins would win Game 2, and in Game 3, both pitching staffs would be electric, as the game was knotted at 2 heading into extras. If there's one thing the Marlins seem to be good at, it's extra inning playoff games. And that wouldn't change here, as despite the Giants going up 3-2 in the 11th, Florida would battle back and load the bases with 2 outs, where Ivan Rodriguez would end the game.
Base hit to right. Here comes the tying run. And here
In Game 4, where both teams were tied again at 8, the team would once again come up clutch again, as this time Cabrera would drive in 2 to put the Marlins up 7-5. However, San Francisco would not quit, as JT Snow would hit a single to bring it within 1, and then a hit by pitch made it first and second with 2 outs, where Jeffrey Hammonds would hit it out to left, where Jeff Conine couldn't reach. This would be an easy score, but Conine's arm made it close, and Rodriguez was able to somehow hold onto the ball to secure the out and the series win. However, they would run into another team looking to change their destiny. The Chicago Cubs, much like the Indians, have not won a title in a long time. Like a really long time. Almost 100 years, in fact. But they were able to upset the Braves to get to their first NLCS since '89. Cubs fans have been aching for a really long time for a team that can go on a good run and finally bring home a title. As 40,000 people packed into Wrigley Field for Game 1, the Marlins would showcase their resiliency once again, as a 4-run first by Chicago would be answered by a 5-run third. Once again, the game would go into extras, and with the Marlins being how they are, they once again came through, with Mike Lowell hitting the go-ahead homer to win Game 1 in the 11th. However, the tide would quickly change, as the Cubs would crush Florida in Game 2, and in Game 3, their luck in extra innings would run out, as Chicago would pull away on the road. In Game 4, Dontrelle Willis would be lit up early on, as the game quickly spiraled out of reach. What had once been a big Game 1 win in Chicago had quickly spiraled into a 3-1 deficit, as the Marlins were challenged with winning 3 in a row against a team that seemed to be holding all of the momentum, including winning 2 at Wrigley. If the blow-up of the '97 team was good for one thing, it's the fact that it landed them that second overall pick, which they used to select Josh Beckett, who would make his MLB debut in 2001, and quickly form into a regular in the rotation. And in Game 5, he would prove it as he threw one of the most dominant games in his career, a complete game shutout, only giving up 2 hits on 115 pitches. An absolutely incredible performance to keep his team alive, as they would push the series back to Chicago. But the real test was yet to come, as now they had to hold their own against a raucous Wrigley crowd. And sure enough, the Cubs would get the lead early with a Sammy Sosa double, and tack on a couple more runs, and Chicago was up 3-0 with only 6 outs to get. Mark Pryor would take the mound, and after a flyout, Juan Pierre would hit a deep ball that resulted in a double. And Castillo would hit a foul ball towards the left field wall. Funnily enough, the man in left was none other than Moise Alou, the man who was instrumental in the '97 run, and was soon after traded to Houston and then Chicago. He would reach for the ball, but it would be intercepted by a fan, Steve Bartman, who reached over to snag the ball out of his glove. A seemingly inconspicuous play, as it was annoying as he robbed an out, but the Cubs were still in control. Or so they thought. As unbeknownst to everyone at that moment, that catch would become the catalyst for a catastrophe at Wrigley Field. The curse from over 70 years ago rearing its ugly head once again in the worst possible time. It had been 95 years to the day since the 1908 Cubs defeated the Tigers to win the World Series. And now, nearly a century later, the ghosts of years long past continue to torment the Chicago Cubs. What followed was basically retribution by the baseball gods, as the Marlins would go on a tear. The next 6 batters would all reach safely, including a wild pitch, an error, and 2 intentional walks. A double by Derek Lee would tie the game, and a sac fly by Jeff Conine would give them the lead. And then, with the bases loaded with 2 outs, Mike Mordecai would lace a bases-clearing double to left, where Alu could only watch as 3 more Marlins would cross the plate. When it was all said and done, what had once been a situation where the Cubs were 5 outs away from the World Series had become an 8-3 blowout. And all of a sudden, this series was heading to Game 7. For fans of these teams who have suffered for so long, there has to be a point when it just becomes unbearable, like they've been smited by powers above. How come the little old Marlins get to have great success while they have to endure decades upon decades of misery? How come the Marlins get to win a title in just their 5th year, while the Indians have gone almost 80 years without one? How come the Marlins get to seemingly resurrect from the dead after blowing it up, like it was all one big master plan? How come even when they have their backs against the wall, divine judgment strikes down all of their foes? How can the Cubs, with all of their history and legacy, with the weight of the whole city on their shoulders, be beaten by the fucking Florida Marlins? It seemed inevitable, as even though Chicago would come back from down 3-0 to take a 5-3 lead in Game 7, the Marlins would once again power through and take it right back. They seemed like a force. They seemed like the manifestation of the baseball gods throwing down their sentence that this team can never and will never win again. Or maybe I'm just being overly dramatic. After all, this is the Florida Marlins we're talking about, where nothing makes sense. Maybe it's useless to question just how they were able to pull all this bullshit off, but in the end, the Marlins just did whatever the hell they wanted, and they didn't give a shit about anything else. Did the ever-increasing odds matter against them? Fuck no. It didn't stop them in 97, why would it now? Oh, what's this? They're facing the New York Yankees, who just recently won 3 titles in a row and are heavily favored here? Ha! You don't know Marlins baseball. In front of the most annoying-ass fans in the world, the Marlins told them all to shut the fuck up, as they would hold on for a Game 1 win. Once again, their opponent would strike back, with the Yankees winning both Games 2 and 3 with a final of 6-1. Did it faze them? Of course not. This is the Marlins, who are used to pulling off the impossible. And sure enough, they would hang in there in Game 4, as in front of 65,000 fans in Miami, Alex Gonzalez would hit perhaps the most iconic homer in franchise history to tie the series. Then the offense would propel them in Game 5, nabbing another victory, and the Marlins were once again 1 win away from the championship. How dare the Marlins play toe-to-toe with the Titans of the league? Who do they think they are? They've only been around for 11 years. They're just a shitty little team from Florida. They don't get to experience this yet. Don't you know you have to go through incredible suffering to earn the right to win a title? The Yankees just came off losing to the fucking Diamondbacks of all teams, and now they're about to lose here? Won't somebody think of the history? Hello, it's Josh Beckett calling, and he has a message for the entire baseball world. when I look back at this footage, it hits me with a terrible sense of dread. I mean, look at how happy these guys are. They've just won the World Series for the second time in 6 years, against the Yankees no less. They're pretty much on top of the world, and only good times are ahead, right? If only that were the case. None of them could have known, and perhaps none of them should have known, but the Marlins would never again come even close to this moment. Over the next 2 decades, the Florida Marlins will be completely and utterly destroyed, and the memories of these moments will be just that, memories of a time long since past. So, savor it while you can, because it's a long way down.